Jonathan Watt with the Tara Group International. We hope you're enjoying our content, and if you are, please press the like button and subscribe to our channel. We're doing a little series on ancient church history, and in this particular episode, I want to talk about the Desert Fathers of early Christianity who were pioneers of the inner life. You know, when people speak of Christian monasticism, its origins are often traced to barren and unforgiving landscapes, specifically the deserts of Egypt, Palestine, and Syria. And in these places, during the 3rd through the 5th centuries, there was a group of men that withdrew from cities and villages to seek God in silence, solitude, and the practice of what we probably could call radical simplicity. These men came to be known as the Desert Fathers, or the abbas, and their lives laid the groundwork for centuries of Christian spiritual practice. However, far from being escapists or extremists, most Desert Fathers were careful observers of the human heart. The desert was not only a geographical place for them, but it was an interior one, a landscape where distractions were stripped away, and the soul was brought face to face with its deepest longings and also its fears. So, who were the Desert Fathers? They emerged during a period of profound transition in Christian history, especially after Christianity was legalized under Constantine in the early 4th century. The faith rapidly moved from the margins of Roman society to the center of public life. Now, for some, this shift created a spiritual tension. The question was, how could one live with the same intensity and devotion once demanded under persecution, given that, in a sense, life had become easier? So the desert became an answer, and men left their social status and their careers and even family ties to live lives of prayer and fasting and basic manual labor for survival. Some admittedly lived as hermits in caves or abandoned structures. Others formed loose communities centered often around a respected elder. Food was sparse, sleep was minimal, and the environment was harsh and sometimes unforgiving. The desert offered no comforts, but it offered some clarity. So these men were called abbas, meaning fathers, a title earned not through rank, but through spiritual maturity. An abba was someone who had faced himself honestly and could therefore have the right, if you will, to guide others with wisdom and also restraint. And their teachings were preserved in collections such as the apothegmata, patrum, the sayings of the Desert Fathers, which present short, simple sayings shaped by a lived and practiced experience. There was Abba known as Antony the Great, who had the desert as a battleground. Among the earliest and most influential of the Desert Fathers, Abba Anthony the Great, often called the father of monasticism, was born in Egypt, and in the late 3rd century, Antony was raised in a Christian household of modest means, but after hearing the gospel command to sell what you have and give it to the poor, he took the words quite literally, distributing his possessions and then withdrawing into solitude. Anthony's desert life was marked by intense spiritual struggle. According to early accounts, he battled fear, despair, temptation, and, of course, isolation, experiences he understood not as distractions from holiness, but as the very arena in which transformation could occur. You know, he once said, quote, "Whoever sits in solitude and is quiet has escaped from 3 wars, hearing, speaking, and seeing. Yet there's one thing against which he must continually fight, that is, his own heart." That's Anthony. Anyway, though he sought solitude, Anthony did not remain hidden. Others came to him for counsel, and his presence gave rise to a loose network of hermits who looked to him as a spiritual father. And his wisdom and his emphasis on humility and perseverance were to be found repeatedly. Expect temptation to your last breath, he warned, underscoring the lifelong nature of inner vigilance. Anthony's desert was not a place of escape, but a training ground, a place where the soul learned attention, patience, and dependence on God alone. Then there's Abba Pullman, compassion as spiritual wisdom. If Antony represents the desert as battleground, Abba Pullman embodies it as a school of compassion. One of the most frequently quoted desert fathers, Pullman lived within a monastic community, became known for his gentleness and discernment. His sayings reveal a spirituality deeply attuned to human weakness. When asked what was most important for a monk, Pullman replied, "Teach your mouth to say that which is in your heart." So for Pullman, integrity and honesty mattered more than extreme asceticism. He warned about harsh judgment, insisting that self-knowledge was the true beginning of wisdom. And in one well-known saying, Pullman remarked, "A person who teaches without first doing what he teaches is like a spring which cleanses and gives drink to everyone, but is itself full of dirt." Interesting. His authority rested not in words alone, however, but in his alignment between practice and life. Pullman's desert wisdom emphasized mercy toward oneself and toward others. And he believed that salvation was worked out not through perfection, but through patience and through humility and also through love. So why the Desert Fathers matter? It's because they articulated a vision of spirituality rooted in an interior transformation rather than external conformity. Their practices, silence, solitude, fasting, and prayer were not ends in themselves, but tools for cultivating attentiveness and a freedom of the heart. They also challenge modern assumptions about success and productivity. In our culture that prizes visibility and achievement, the Desert Fathers chose obscurity and stillness. And their lives suggest that depth is formed slowly, often invisibly, through sustained faithfulness rather than through dramatic moments. And importantly, their teachings are marked by restraint. The Desert Fathers rarely offered elaborate theories. Instead, they spoke in short, piercing sentences with words shaped by years of lived experience in conditions that allowed little to no self-deception. So think of it, the desert as a way of life. For the Desert Fathers, the desert was not merely a place left behind once wisdom was gained. It was a way of being, a commitment to simplicity and to presence and to continual self-examination. And so even those who later lived in communities carried the desert with them, so to speak, guarding silence and humility as sacred spaces. Now, their legacy continues to influence Christian monasticism, spiritual direction, and contemplative practice across traditions. The very questions they asked about desire and distraction and fear and love remain profoundly relevant to this very day. If you're interested in some resources for further consideration of this and seeking a direct encounter with teaching of the Desert Fathers, there's the Apophthegmata Patrum, the Sayings of the Desert Fathers. It's an essential text offering unadorned wisdom and shaped by desert experience. Another accessible and reflective resource is The Way of the Heart, the Spirituality of the Desert Fathers and Mothers by Henri Nouwen. And drawing on the desert tradition, Nouwen explores silence and solitude and prayer as enduring spiritual disciplines that bring ancient practice together with modern spiritual longing. So, final thought from us. The Desert Fathers remain for us and remind us that the spiritual life is not about escape from the world, but about learning how to inhabit it with clarity and with compassion. And their desert was a place of encounter with God, with oneself and with the truth of the human heart. And in their silence, they discovered a wisdom that still speaks, and a transformation begins not in doing more, but in listening more deeply. So in the wisdom of the Desert Fathers, we invite you at Atara to deepen practice of silence and discernment and spiritual formation. Atara Group International offers opportunities to engage these traditions in meaningful ways, and we partner with individuals and churches and organizations to develop contemplative programs that provide pastoral counseling and coaching, design keynote presentations, and retreat experiences grounded in ancient wisdom and tradition. So whether you are seeking personal renewal or hoping to cultivate a deeper spiritual life within your community, Tara Group supports thoughtful, embodied approaches to formation that honor both the tradition and the lived experiences, such as what we're describing with the Desert Fathers.